Hi everyone, it's Lindsay and I'm here today to share with you multicolor stamping with Joy Clair Stamps and MISTI. Now once you're done here with the video, make sure you head on over to my blog because there's a great blog hop as well as some giveaways that are going on. So I'm going to be using the mini MISTI today. This is just a smaller version of the original MISTI and it comes at a cheaper price point. And just like the original, you do get the tool, you get the foam insert so you can use it with your clear stamps or your foam mounted stamps. You also get a little grid paper with it. And then you also get tube magnets. Now these are very strong and the nature of these magnets are brittle. You can see I placed these off to the side and even that far apart, they attract each other and snap together. I'm lucky mine didn't break, so just be a little extra careful when you're handling your magnets. So this tool was created by a card maker and paper crafter for card makers and paper crafters. So it is very well thought out. You have your rulers around all the sides. You have your grid mat not only on the inside, but you also have grid paper that fits on top of the foam insert. So you get used with two different kind of stamps. And then you also have that grid on the front lid, which helps you line up your stamps. Now I'm going to be using my MISTI along with my Joy Clair Stamps. So I will need that foam insert because my Joy Clair Stamps are my clear or acrylic stamps. So I need that foam insert to kind of prop them up and really help them press into the paper. So I'm using two new stamp sets that were just released this month, and they are Springtime Flowers, and then I'll also be using Hello Sentiments, which you'll see later. So the first thing I want to do is take this little dandelion. I'm guessing, is that what it is? It's a dandelion that has all the little fuzzies on it. So I'm going to be using that for my stamping today on this certain card, and I'm going to be doing 4 separate projects. So I want to show you some multicolor stamping that you can do with your MISTI. Now you can use your MISTI for just your traditional stamping, but not only when you get this tool do you get the ability to do your traditional stamping, you get that option to double stamp or make multiples of cards that are exactly the same, but you get a whole new world of techniques that might have been a little bit harder to do or might have been impossible to do without this tool. So I want to show you some multicolor stamping with this tool. So the first thing I did was I inked up that stamp all around the edges and the stem. I didn't ink up the center very much with a darker blue ink. Now I'm going to ink up the center of the stamp with this lighter cracked pistachio ink. And now I have this great multicolored stamped image right on my paper. Now also with this particular stamp, I'm actually going to stretch it out a little bit too. Make it longer than it is on my paper. So you can see I've stamped this up on the left hand corner towards the top of my die cut white cardstock paper here. And I've done my multicolor stamping. It wasn't as dark as I wanted it because I'm using distress inks here. They get a little splotchy and they're not quite as dark the first time. So because I'm using this tool, I've got that great ability to go back in and restamp as many times as I need to get it as dark as I want and to blend those two inks together. Now, this stem wasn't quite as long as I wanted it, so what I did was I moved it up, stamped it on the top of the paper, and now I'm going to move it down, connect the stem as I move this stamp down, and I'm just going to go in and ink up the stem portion now with my darker blue ink. I will stamp this down a few times, and now I have an extended stamp. So I have literally stretched my stamped image and I've made it longer than it traditionally was to fill up my card how I want it to fill it up. And this just makes this technique a little bit easier with this tool because I have that option of lining it up, looking through, double checking, always pulling my lid down and double checking before I actually stamp it. Now I'm moving on to this next little dandelion that has the little pieces flying away. And again, I'm just going to do that same inking. So I'm inking up the outside edges with that darker blue ink. And then I'll come in the center with that cracked pistachio and I will stamp the center of this. And I've got these great ombre two-tone stamped images ready to go. And that's all I need to do on this card. All I need to do is add a sentiment and it's ready to go. So, like I said before, I can stamp my sentiments with this tool as well. So I'm using the Hello Sentiments from Joy Clair Stamps that are brand new this month as well. and I'm stamping the sending, and then right underneath that, I'm going to position sympathy. Now, I have the option to look through that lid, and it's got those grid lines on it, so I can make sure my sentiments are straight on my card base. I can't tell you how many times before I started using this tool that I would go and I would do all this coloring on my card bases and on my cards and put in all this time and effort, and then I would ruin the entire thing by misstamping my sentiment or dropping my sentiment, or I didn't get a very good stamp this time. I didn't press down quite hard enough, and my ink pad is getting a little dry. So I can go back and double stamp. I know it's going to be lined up perfectly, and I get that dark, rich color that I really want from my sentiments to allow them to pop. And I also know that if I drop my lid on this, it's going to land in the right spot. So all my clumsiness is okay now. So I finished off this card by mounting it onto an A2 top folding white card base that I had applied some black cardstock onto. I put that die cut panel on, added a few enamel accents, and this card was done. So now I'm going to move on to my second card. Now for this one, I have a piece of 3.5 by 5.5 inch watercolor paper, or no, this is regular white cardstock, excuse me. And I've just placed this right down into the bottom left-hand corner. And you can see here that you can use the MISTI vertical or horizontally. Either way works. So you get both uses out of that. So don't think that just because this mini MISTI is a little bit smaller when you use it in the vertical, you can turn this and get a little bit more space and use out of it if you turn it and use it in a horizontal way. So I'm using this tulip image from the Springtime Flower stamp set. Again, I'm using that same stamp set, and this time I want to stamp these tulips all in a row. So this tool is going to help me not only do my multi-color stamping with these flowers, but it's also going to allow me to space them evenly apart on my cardstock and also make sure that they are centered correctly. So I'm first inking up the stem and the leaf with some green ink, and then I'm coming in with different colors of inks for the top of the flower, so for the actual flower portion and the petals. So this one I'm stamping with some yellow ink, and again, it's not quite dark enough with my first stamp, so I get to go back and I get to double stamp and know that it's going to stamp directly on top of where it stamped before. And now the great thing is I can look right through that grid whenever I go and I try and line this up again with that same image that I stamped beforehand, and I get to space it correctly too. So now I get correct spacing and I get correct placement on my cardstock, and I get to double check. That is a big thing to me, is when I get to double check and make sure everything's lined up, and I get to move things around before I actually stamp it down. Now I'm going to be doing some rainbow order for these flowers. So on this one, I went ahead and started in the center, so I made sure that I had my center flowers right in the center of my panel. And now I'm going to move to the left of that first flower, and I've stamped my orange flower. And now I'm going to stamp off on the left-hand side of this cardstock. So what I need to do is actually move my panel over to like the center of the MISTI. And that's where your magnets come into place. They're going to hold your paper in place because this platform is magnetic, and these magnets are so strong. They're going to hold that paper in place and make sure that you get perfect stamping alignment each and every time. Now, if you do have a little bit of trouble getting your paper to stick, especially if your stamps are new, then they tend to stick to your paper a little bit more. Just stick your bone folder in there and hold it in place the first few times. And once your stamp gets nice and inked up and gets conditioned, it's not going to stick anymore, and those magnets will hold it in place for you. So now I moved on to the right side of that first flower, and I'm going to stamp this one in green. And again, I'm going to get that little bit of blending right where that flower meets the stem. So this is going to look very seamless in my stamping. Now, on the right hand side of that green one, I'll go ahead and stamp my blue flower first and then ink up that bottom portion in green. Now, you could by all means stamp the flower and the stem at the same time. You don't have to do them separately like I'm doing here. But I just wanted to get that kind of seamless blend, and I didn't want any of the green ink on any of my other ink pads, so that's why I did it this way. Now I'm moving on to that last purple flower, and finally that stem for that purple flower. And here's just a closer look at that finished panel, all stamped out and ready to go on a card. Now also with this, you get great placement on your die cuts. So here I have just a little circle die cut that I'm gonna stamp Happy Birthday. And this is from the Let's Celebrate stamp set that was also released this past month. And I'm just gonna stamp this right down with some VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And then I can pop that die cut that has my perfectly placed sentiment on it onto this finished card. You can see I just put this on a black panel, did some stitched die cutting on the top and bottom of that stamp panel, and just popped that onto an A2 side folding white card base. Now on this particular example, I'm actually going to be using some watercolor paper. Now I wanted to do a rainbow sentiment, so I have the word happy from the Hello Sentiment stamp set, and this is a very scripty happy, so it's all connected. Now I'm first going to start out with some red dye ink on the left hand side, and I'm just going to move in rainbow order across this sentiment. So I'm overlapping where I stamp a little bit. So I moved on to orange and stamped out a little bit of that H and into the A, and then the A into the P, I'll stamp in yellow, and so forth until I get through my rainbow colors. And I'm just overlapping these, stamping them a few times just to get a nice blended sentiment here that is going to be rainbow when I'm finished with it. So this is just another way to take that multicolor stamping technique and kick it up a notch and make it fun. So now I've moved on to that last little bit of purple, and I'm blending that into the blue, and there you can see I have a rainbow ombre sentiment. And all I needed to do was add a little birthday. I added some watercolor splatters and sequins, popped that panel up onto an A2 side folding card base as well, and that card is ready to go. So you get a really great amount of use out of this tool, so many different techniques you can do with it. And now I'm going to do that same technique, but instead of a rainbow sentiment, I'm just going to do an ombre sentiment with 2 different colors. So you don't need a ton of ink pads for this technique. For this particular card, I'm using the Thanks sentiment, again from the Hello Sentiment stamp set from Joy Clair Stamps. And I'm just making sure that my ink pad is at a little bit of an angle when I'm inking it up. And if I get ink on that lid, that's okay. All I'm going to do is wipe it down later with a wet cloth. And I'll show you how I do that as well. So I'm just inking up my top of my sentiment with my black dye ink pad. And then once I stamp that down a few times, I'm going to go ahead and bring in a gray ink pad. But you can see here I need to get that black ink off first. So what I like to do is take a spray bottle filled with water, just spritz my little lid here because it's all just able to wipe down, and then I just wipe it off and take away that ink. And that's how I clean my MISTI lid. I don't use any baby wipes or anything on that unless it's extremely dirty. I just like to use plain water. So I went ahead and stamped that gray, and there I've got a black to gray ombre sentiment that I just masked out, did some distressing blending, and popped that onto a square card base to finish off that card. So this was only one technique. It's the multicolor stamping technique that you can do with your MISTI. However, you can see how many great uses and different variations you can come up with this just to make these different cards. So here I used 2 different colors of blue inks to create that nice sympathy card. And then this one, again, I used 2 different colors of ink on each flower for a line stamp look and a rainbow effect on my card. Then I did my rainbow sentiment and my splatters. And then also that last one, I just used 2 different colors of ink to create that ombre sentiment right in the center of that bright and colorful thank you card. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm going to leave you with a few pictures of all of the finished cards, as well as that last card I did as well. And that closer look will give you a little bit of a better look at that nice ombre effect you can get with your MISTI stamping tool and your Joy Clair stamps. Enjoy the pictures. For more information and the supply list, you can head over to my blog, and make sure you do so because there are some giveaways going on with the blog hop. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and happy crafting!